Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ritual of Wild. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you today with Vanessa Bennett. Vanessa Bennett is a licensed depth psychotherapist, author, and facilitator celebrated for her no-nonsense yet deeply compassionate approach to healing and growth. She co-authored the best-selling relationship book, It's Not Me, It's You, and is the author of her newest release, The Motherhood Myth. She's a former New Yorker, now based in Los Angeles, and Vanessa is also the co-host of the widely loved podcast, Cheaper Than Therapy, and leads transformational retreats and workshops grounded in Jungian and depth-oriented psychology. Through her work, whether writing, teaching, or holding space, Vanessa supports others in breaking free from generational patterns and reclaiming their truest, most authentic selves. I'm so glad I got to be in conversation with Vanessa and explore from mother to mother, human to human, what it is to be alive in this wild experience that we are navigating as humans. And it's interesting to notice how so many of us carry a fear of transformation, especially when it comes to birthing new iterations of our lives. Change, whether they are small or seismic, can feel so deeply unsettling. And yet, when we resist it, we miss one of the most powerful aspects of being human. We fragment ourselves, and with that can come shame and guilt and the urge to control what was never meant to be contained. So when I had my conversation with Vanessa, we explored the myths that tell us that motherhood, parenting, and partnering should come naturally, and the freedom that opens when we let go of the stories we tell ourselves in resistance to what is. When we begin to return home to ourselves, we learn to honor what is true within us and to witness it and hold it with compassion as it unfolds, not according to what the world expects of us, but in the integrity of our own experience and our own becoming. My hope is that you enter this conversation with an open heart and leave with the gentle reminder that your sovereignty and your inner voice and your lived experience are so worthy of dignity and honoring. They do not need to fit into society's mold to be valid. And being here with Vanessa today had so many key points of wisdoms through which she was able to reflect this in a digestible way. So thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate your presence so much. And if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on Spotify, please share it with anyone that you would recommend this to. And it always helps if you like and subscribe to the channel or like it on Spotify, as this helps reach more people that could benefit from listening to this conversation. I love being here with you and sharing my time, and thank you again for sharing your most precious resource of time. Without further ado, here is our conversation. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ritual of Wild. I'm so excited to have you here, Vanessa Bennett, all the way from Costa Rica. We are going to explore themes in her book, The Motherhood Myth, which I am really excited to get into with you today. And thank you so much for being here, Vanessa.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me. I'm excited to chat.
How does it feel having released your book in the last little while with all of the life things that you were juggling? I know you have a little one. I know you guys are orienting your life to Costa Rica at the moment from the LA fires. How does it feel as a mother and a human to bring this out in the world with all of those things that you're navigating?
It's kind of wild because at one point, my final manuscript with my last round of changes was due originally 2 weeks after the fires. And so obviously I had to take a little bit more time than that. And I give a shout out to Sounds True for making up the time needed on the back end, and it didn't screw up the release date. But what I will say is that it felt a little like I was transmuting some of what was going on in my life into the creative process, right? And so partly now looking back, I cannot believe that I was able to pull it off because the amount of just what needs to be done when something of that magnitude happens in your life, right, is unfathomable for most of us. But it was, and I do think that even on the other side of it, right? So like you said, we've moved our family to Costa Rica, at least for the year, to kind of reset and figure out what is next for us. But there has just been a lot of change, juggling a lot of things all at one time. And also 3 different people in my family, and all of us going through 3 different experiences, 3 different versions of grief, 3 different versions of, change. Like my daughter starts kindergarten. So it's been a lot. And yet I'm holding that with the, I guess, positive. It's not really the best word, but like the positive of, like I said, that transmuting of my kind of creativity post disaster.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I have so much compassion for it because I often, as a mother myself, I have a 2 and 4-year-old, and we started later, which was considered like geriatric in the
Oh yeah,
Western
me too.
world. I was 37, which I couldn't believe I was geriatric. But anyway, what I've noticed in my own journey and what I feel validated in throughout your book is that there's this myth or this paradigm through which motherhood needs to be separate from our creativity when really it's all encompassing, and when we can lean into it as one whole experience and we stop fragmenting it, I felt like it just took so much pressure off.
Love that you said that, actually. Thank you for kind of reflecting it back to me in that way, because I think that is what I see happen so often with the mothers that come to me, whether it's individual therapy, whether it's my retreats or my group work or just myself, my friends, is that we do feel fragmented, right? And we don't feel like there's space for all of these parts of ourselves to live together under one roof, right? And so if I'm going to be a good mom, then I have to almost like cut off these other parts of myself. And what you just said is so spot on, which is no, actually, it's the opposite. To be a good mom, I actually have to, more than before, integrate and bring forth these parts of myself that make me who I am. That's actually part of being a good mother.
Yeah. And to deepen into that, what I felt too is like, I want to be good. Yes, that's true, but I'd rather be whole. That wholeness is so, it's interesting, right? As a parent, especially now that I'm 42, I just think of like parenting my children is actually reparenting myself, but to
Totally.
love them is to love myself, because so much of the shadow, and when I say the shadow, I refer to it as just the parts of myself that I felt shame around before, is actually wanting to be walked towards the light. It's not wanting to be like this thing that I keep away from my ability to be present with my kids and also with the humanity within me. I know it's not easy to, like, we're in practice all the time, right? Like it's easy for me to want to like be in public and my kids are having a meltdown and I'm like, don't do that right here. But also in that disruption, I find it's the most fluid when I allow them to do that right here, you know?
Yeah, when you
It's
allow them
hard.
to be in their humanity, and in which
Yeah,
case you're allowed to, in essence, be in your humanity, right? And look, there's, this because you're in it too with the littles, like there is a boundary, right?
for
Between
sure.
we validate, we honor, we allow, and also we give you structures and boundaries around this is how you exist in a world, right? And so there is a way that we can maybe swing too far, but I think our generation, and I'm speaking generally here, but I think our parenting from our parents and grandparents was the other side of the extreme, right?
Yeah.
Which was so much about the external, so much about how we look to the outside, so much about falling in line, being in control, doing what you're told, kind of having those check boxes that I will say I've seen a lot of parents almost swing too far. Right. And so
Yeah.
I like that we're maybe, I don't know, I'm hoping that we're trying to sort of find our way into that middle ground. Right.
For sure. It reminds me of this one quote that I heard from another psychologist, and she would say, all feelings welcome, not all behaviors. So,
Ooh, I like that.
yeah. And it's something I even say to my partner as like, if we have a conflict, it's like that also applies to us as adults, because the beautiful thing, to circle back to what you said at the start, was you're navigating 3 different experiences. And often the times that I struggle the most is when I'm noticing a story that is creating so much resistance because the story is attached to a condition that I've led to believe my whole life that was good and right. When we forget that, like, we're actually cultivating our own family system here. So what's true and what's right for us, which I love about,
And for them,
and for them,
right? Like our
especially for them.
kids, like
Yeah.
who cares if we say it's good and right? They might not agree.
Yeah.
We also, like, we don't own our children. So I don't really believe actually that it's our job to mold and shape our children into good people. believe that our children are inherently born good, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to look to us to see an example of how they might live. But just because we say it doesn't mean it's their truth. And we know what that feels like, most of us, again, going back to what I was saying about previous generations parenting. And so what I don't want to do is do the same to her, where I make it very clear, like, because I say so, this is good and this is bad. And because you're a different person and that might not align for you, now you feel bad inherently.
Yeah, which is so hard to do because I feel like it runs so deep.
So
And
deep.
I'm curious for you, like, so I got the honor of reading parts of your book, and then I also went into your work and just looked at little things that you speak to. And so I have this exploration of where I'd like the conversation to go, if that's all right with you. And one of the things I wanted to ask, which we've sort of opened up with, is what does it mean to you to be a partner and a parent in today's climate?
Yeah. What does it mean to me? I mean, I guess what it means to me is to allow myself to be perfectly inhuman, or perfectly human, I mean, which is to be imperfect. So messy and imperfect as a version of a perfect human, right? So I think it's that. I think it's finding my way through the shame around that imperfection and modeling that for both my daughter and honestly my partner too. Like, I'm going to own my imperfections and know that it makes me who I am. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something I had to learn later in life, which is, and actually one of my best friends says this often, this idea of like, no amount of me is made smaller. No amount of me is made less than by accepting and speaking to and acknowledging faults, or acknowledging ways that I've wronged somebody, or apologizing, or owning my part. Right. And I think it's that. So it's like, what does it mean to be a human, a mother, a partner in today's world? I think it's allowing for imperfection, allowing for evolution, and allowing for like disconnection and allowing for discontent, because I think that's also something that a lot of us weren't trained to do. I think we run around in our relationships, all of them, trying to make it good, trying to make it copacetic, trying to make it feel good. And so the allowance of the disconnection, the allowance of the discord has actually been really important, I think, for me.
Yeah, it also lends to teaching about repair. Like there's so much that happens in the rupture, in the dark, and that's a lesson I'm really in the season in as a parent and a partner, is noticing, like, we're also in the middle of a move right now, not a big one like yours, but still a move where four different people are going to navigate four different experiences. And we also had to navigate a lot of viruses this summer. Like we had hand, foot, mouth, and then I got it, and then my husband got the flu. So it was just interesting. But what it did was it put me in this cauldron of like stillness in which I had to confront all the things our family system wasn't meant to really get used to. It was just really interesting and really uncomfortable. And I think I cried more than my children. I've noticed like what I'm tracking within the mothers in my own community, especially with single moms. Like my partner does shift work. So sometimes I solo, which is absolutely different from single parenting. But it's like we feel like we have to take it on. There's this, I noticed like when you say a compliment, like Sean said this to me, my partner, he said, "You're the glue that holds the family together." And my visceral response, like the somatic response in my body was like, I don't want to be.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah, that's like not a compliment at all.
Nope.
I don't want to
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I don't want to contain anything. I just want to let it all.
When people use that comment, I actually think I wrote this in the book. There's like a header that says like Superwoman is not a compliment.
Yes.
It's the same idea.
And busyness is one hell of a drug.
Yeah. And it's like, that's not the compliment that you think it is when you look at somebody and say that they're a super mom or a superwoman, right? Or that they're the glue that holds the family together. It's like, while I can appreciate the sentiment behind that, we need to understand why that is the way that it is, because I don't want to be the glue that holds this family together. Number one, that's not sustainable for me. And also that doesn't necessarily bring me joy because it's way too much pressure, right?
Yes.
But also we have to be realistic. Like, what if I walked out and got hit by a bus tomorrow? Like it's almost like, in a silly way, it's almost like being that employee that like they absolutely cannot function without. I don't want to be that employee because it's too much pressure, right? And like if the whole ship goes down, then somehow it's on my shoulders. No way, right? No way. I say to my daughter now, I mean, she's a little bit older than yours, but consistently I will say to her, it's not about doing chores. No one's doing chores around here. When I look at like doing the dishes and cooking you dinner, I don't look at that as a chore. It's part of maintaining the family system. It's part of maintaining the household. You have a part in maintaining the household just as much as I have a part in maintaining the household. It looks different, but I don't like the term chores because of that. It shouldn't be looked at that way. We all are a part of this and we're all keeping it going in our own way.
Yeah, it feels like dismantling the version of like hierarchy that is so prevalent in the overculture. And I feel like that's slowly shifting, but it takes a lot of disruption, like even noticing the breakdown of my relationship with my partner as we became parents so that we could emerge as a family system. But no one talks about the grief that comes with motherhood. Like I get chills because I'm into 4 years now and I feel like all I talk about is grief, but I'm like, I don't know what else to tell you. It's what's flowing through my body. And yes, there is joy, there's pleasure, there's blessings, but can we normalize that part of birth? There is death and the death of the self. And I know as a depth psychologist, you work with a lot of archetypes. So I would love it if you could speak to mothers and fathers even about what happens when you're birthing, when you're bringing life into your life and you're building a family system. It's so disruptive. And yet the resistance of that creates more rupture than not, I find.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, if I were to speak more broadly first and then kind of go narrow it in from there, when I look at our culture, right, especially Western culture, we have stripped so much of the numinous. We stripped so much of like the spiritual element out of our daily lives, right? We have really pedestalized the neck up way of being, right? We're so disembodied in so many ways. And with disembodiment comes a disconnection again from nature, from spirit, from, right? And so what I find so often in Western culture in particular is this struggle with duality. And so we have lost the ability to understand that you actually cannot have joy without grief.
Yeah.
You cannot have light without dark, right? If you did not have grief or if you did not have dark, you would have no basis of comparison to actually experience joy and light. And it's the reason why I feel like that duality is a struggle is because we've stripped away our ability to be with death.
Yeah.
Right? We are a society of comfort. And we have built an entire society on becoming more and more and more and more and more comfortable, right? It's a never ending like quest for satiation around not having to struggle, not having any friction. And a little bit of that is grief. And a little bit of that is having to feel sadness and having to reckon with, again, birth, death cycle, right? And so I think that's part of why so many women, and I'll say men too, because there's a lot of death that happens and grief that happens for them in becoming a parent. But that's why I think so many of us struggle with that because nobody, like you said, nobody talks to us about that reality. And so then we're left feeling like, is it me? Is there something wrong with me, right? That I'm not. And this is the main myth that I talk about in the book, which is why it's called the motherhood myth, is it's this idea that like, if motherhood doesn't not only come inherently easy for you, but that you're not completely fulfilled by it and up to your eyeballs with joy, that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Right. And I would argue that's absolutely not the case. It's the opposite. It's actually, society has failed us. Society has set us up to feel like there's something wrong with us for a lot of reasons, but one of them being what we're talking about.
That is such a powerful, powerful nuance to allow and admit. And thank you so much for speaking to this because it almost feels as if like even in groups of mothers, if you were to bring this up, like it almost feels like a crucifixion in a way because it's like, what are you talking about? You're like, it's not everything you thought it was. Or inherently we feel shame and then it becomes a war we start within ourselves and, it becomes a certain depression even. It could go that way. And I often wonder, like those postpartum days, like in the Western society, we get 6 weeks with a midwife and then you're discharged. And most of that 6 weeks is baby focused. And so much happens like hormonally after that 6 weeks within the woman. like she's literally moving through this rite of passage from maiden to mother or from mother to mother because a mother of one is so different from a mother of two
Mm-hmm,
and so
mm-hmm.
on. But it makes me think of this quote by Carl Jung that's like, what is unconscious must be rendered conscious, otherwise it'll rule our life and we'll mistake it as fate. And I can count beyond the number of fingers that I have and toes where I've often shamed myself for thinking or being some sort of way simply by virtue of like, this is not what is considered normal where I
Mm-hmm.
am or how I've been taught. So, how do we begin to navigate that? I feel like slowly we're getting there, but there's so many layers.
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, we have to do the work of understanding not only how we got here, which is why it was so important for me with this book to have it be so steeped in like anthropology and sociology and history, because
Mhm.
you have to know how we got here was actually a bit of a strategic plan. Like there was a strategy put in place that was based in control, that was based in dominance, that was based in wealth hoarding and land hoarding. So to understand that, I find for me, once I had a really clear understanding of those systems, right? And we're talking about systems of dominance here, right? So we could say patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, misogyny, right? There's so many, colonialism. Once I really understood that it was the systems that were inherently set up to control, to keep us in shame. Because if we are functioning from shame, we're going to be perpetually in a state of trying to prove our worthiness and prove our goodness, right? We're never going to feel like we're inherently good and worthy inside. We're going to be constantly trying to prove it. So whether that's proving it through action, whether that's proving it through buying things, whether that's proving it through looking outside of ourselves, that shame is really what holds up many of these systems of dominance, right? But once I understood that, and I was so clear on the history, what it allowed me to do was actually step out of that shame and feel like, oh, hell no, this actually isn't about me. It gave me something to almost focus on. Like, I need to, with my friends and with my partner and with other people that I'm having these conversations with, we need to orient ourselves towards actually dismantling these systems that are keeping us in the shame rather than looking inward and feeling like it's some kind of failure of my own as a person, right? That's why I think that is such an important understanding to have.
Yeah. Have you, when that happened for you, was it like this moment of like deep clarity where it was just this moment in time, or did it happen over time through your education or the experience through which you've had in-depth psychology? Like, what did that feel like for you? Because for
I think
others,
it was all of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, no, that's okay. I'm just so curious how that manifested through your experience, because I was gonna say for so many people, they don't have access to those resources as to understanding the systems. They're just so in the systems. There was this other quote
That's
that
right.
I love where it's like, it is no measure of great health to be adapted to a society that is sick. I think that's how it,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I find too, as a parent that started later, I've had more bigger questions than answers lately. And with all those systems comes all the things you named, like our relationship with money, our relationship with medicine, our relationship with ourself. And so, yeah, it's like, how do we begin? Because it's very disorienting. So how do we begin to even bring that forth within our own community? Do you suggest, as a depth psychologist and as a human and mother, it's just having those uncomfortable conversations within our partnerships, within our own family systems first, starting local versus like this global mission to have to change?
Yeah, right. Because I mean, look, one person can't dismantle patriarchy, right? Like I would have been dismantled by now. So yeah, I think it does start with our Jack Kornfield has this term that I use a lot where he'll say, you know, tending to my corner of the globe and the importance of that. And so I think it is having conversations. I think you're right. I mean, I came to this understanding through a lot of different means and avenues, and it was part of my education, but also I am an information nerd. I can't get enough of learning, right? And so I'm on a constant quest to learn more and understand more. Was it an aha? Not necessarily, because I felt like, especially as I was writing this book, it was like I was following breadcrumbs and I was learning things every step of the way. And I was bringing my partner along for the ride. And I'll tell you, he pushed against a lot of it. And I was like,
Yeah.
you know, not because he doesn't inherently agree that these dominator systems were set up that way. Like he gets it, he understands it, but also it's like telling a fish that they live in water and expecting them to understand that, right? Like when all of us have been swimming in these systems for centuries, it's really hard to see the way in which you benefit from said system in the ways in which, this is why a lot of people have a hard time with this concept of privilege, because they think it's inherently a personal attack on the way that they grew up or what they had or didn't have. It's not, right? My partner is also a person of color, and as a man, he has still inherently had some form of privilege in the models that we live in, right? And so I think it's a really hard pill for somebody to swallow that they were in any way kind of given some sort of, let's say, leg up, right? In a society that teaches us that there's, like you said, a hierarchy, right? But by the way, this hierarchy isn't just within humans. This hierarchy is also humans above animals above Earth, right? And this capitalism to a T. And it impacts the way we look at the world around us and the way in which we're destroying the world around us. If we did not believe that we were above the earth and animals, we wouldn't be destroying it in the way that we are, right? I go back to your original question. Yes, it's having conversations with your friends, with your partner, with people who will listen about it, right? And I think this idea of tending to your corner of the globe looks like I'm going to choose differently. I'm going to choose the way that I show up differently. I'm not going to gatekeep. I'm not going to police other people. I'm not going to be showing up in people's DMs and shaming them for doing things differently than me, which we all need to stop doing, right? I'm going to look in the mirror. And I'm going to see the way in which I'm showing up in my own life and in my own household, first and foremost, right? Where am I actively within my household attempting to dismantle systems of oppression and systems of dominance?
Yeah.
Right? Start there.
It's so big. Like, especially what's going on around the globe. It's like, where within yourself are you oppressed? And especially with like the genocide that we're witnessing right now. And I've thought about this in my own work because I like to work with mothers and women especially. And it's like, how do you speak to mothers and women when we can't speak to all mothers and women that are experiencing this? And in my own experience, it's like, what is the responsibility that I can step into as like a human with dignity, and for the voices that can't speak for themselves? And that sometimes feels so big to take on. So it
does.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in that soup,
I agree. And I would say too, again, this goes back to the conversation around duality, right? Because there isn't just one genocide happening right now. There's actually multiple genocides happening right now. A lot of us aren't talking about them. We're talking about one. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be.
Right.
But why is it that we're only talking about one versus talking about the three that are happening right now on the globe, right? As we currently are sitting here having these conversations. There's still a hierarchy going on. And I think that's important for us to also be looking at, right? Like, it's really hard to not look through the lens of a Western society when all you know is looking through the lens of a Western society. And so it's duality, meaning we hold all of these seemingly opposing truths. We hold all of the things that feel like they shouldn't all be true at the same time, right? And we say, like, what else could be true? Or we say, yes, and I can speak out and I can be upset about these injustices, and I can do my best to be out there talking about, like you said, giving voice to people who don't have the voice. And I still need to be paying attention to what's going on in my own world and in my own life, in my own family. You can't have one without the other, right? And what I have found is that for a lot of us, we get so lost in what's happening in the world that we forget to come home, right? And I think this is by nature of social media and the globalization of the world. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily bad or wrong with that, but I would say that as human beings, our nervous systems were not actually designed to hold this much suffering at once. We were not actually designed to know all of the atrocities going on in every corner of the globe, right? And so it makes sense to me that a lot of us feel incapacitated by what is happening. It's a lot, right? It's a lot to hold. But I can't allow what's happening in the world to impact the way that I'm able to show up with my daughter, right? Because that's also not helpful. So we've got to figure out, and I don't necessarily have like the right, air quote, right answer, but we do have to figure out a way for us to come back to that feeling of duality again and say, like, yes, and like, how do I do both?
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that. That's really important. circling back to what you said, like you cannot have like birth without death and loss without joy. And I was thinking about that because part of the somatic work I'm studying right now, we were speaking to pleasure and joy, and we could speak to this through from your book as well. But like mothers not knowing how to admit pleasure into their life because of this feeling of guilt. Usually it perpetuates shame and guilt. And what I'm learning too is like what that opened up for me was noticing how I could feel joy and just not need anything from the joy. And my friend and I had this beautiful conversation this morning, and she was saying how she's with a partner and her love language is words of affirmation, but his is
acts of service.
Yes, thank you so much.
They usually go hand in hand.
And she was having this moment where she was like, it's so nice to see you. I've been looking forward to seeing you all week. And he was like, thank you. But within herself, she was like, oh, is he doubting our relationship or whatever? But it's just really interesting to notice how, like, we're not mind readers, right? So when we get clear on those conversations, it allows for deeper connection, even through the discomfort. But there's so much where we think we have to fill in the blanks all the time in relationship and everything else. And it almost feels like this conditioning of, I need to know the outcome, but really no leaving space for the unknown.
No leaving space for the unknown, and no ability to come back to myself and say that this person is not like me. They don't think like me. They don't see the world like I do. They don't feel and experience love the way I do, or express it in the way I do. And there is nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong.
And it doesn't actually have anything to do with me and with my lovability and worthiness. And we as humans have a really bad habit of personalizing everything. Like humans are inherently very egocentric. And we love to make it about us all the time, right? Yeah. And so I think there's so much work to be done in our ability to come home to ourselves and say, okay, I know this person, and I know that actually doesn't have anything to do with me. That's how they are. Words make them uncomfortable, right? And so, I mean, my partner and I have worked through this ourselves. We wrote about love language differences in our last book that we did together, where, it's this discovery that I don't need him to love me in the way that I need him to love me to be loved. I have a choice in the matter. I'm not a victim to this, right? And what I really started looking at was, so for example, I'm the one that's acts of service. He's the one that's words of affirmation.
Interesting.
There was a lot of conversation around, yes, I can give you words. It's going to be very uncomfortable for me. It does not come naturally for me. It's going to be a stretch for me. So I can do it when I feel called to do it, which I do sometimes, and I will write a beautiful card or a text message occasionally. It's not as often as my partner wishes it were. But sure, let's just say, for your sake, because this is how you feel best, I will do this for you. Is that really what you want? Do you really want me to be so uncomfortable in my love for you because I am trying to do what you want me to do to make you feel loved, that I'm essentially, in a minimal way in this example, because it's not this minimal in touch as an example of love languages, but I'm in essence abandoning myself.
Right.
So what you're asking me to do is abandon myself to love you. That's not going to last.
No. And it makes me think of how transactional we've led relationships to be versus
you said the word.
Engaging in. Can we engage? Yeah. And then I'm getting like this download right now where I'm like, oh my God, this is like the microcosm of what's wrong in the world, because we've made every fucking thing, excuse my French, transactional down to the earth and what we need from the Great Mother.
That's right.
And mothers, I'm just having this weird.
You nailed it. And this is why I say so often in these conversations we're having about, codependency and interdependence. And I've been saying for years, we are a codependent society, period. I'm so sick of people saying like, well, I'm not codependent. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. What does that mean? That means that you outsource your sense of worth. That's what that means. That means you do not have the ability to come home to yourself and know that you are inherently worthy and lovable, and that nobody has to be any other way than who and how they are for you to be loved and for you to love them.
Yeah. I just really admire your fire as you speak to this. It's wild for me to like, I don't know, something's happening in real time where I'm receiving this and it's making me emotional, just like as a mother and as a human, because I'm realizing something, like I feel like I've known this, but when it is transactional, we miss out on so much. And then that is the basis of condition, condition, condition.
That's
I
right.
need you to be a certain way for me to feel a certain thing.
That's
And
right.
it's so power, it renders us so powerless. And
That's
this
right.
is how we operate.
And also, like, then think about that with our children. This is
Yeah,
how we raise our children as well, right? And this is how we were raised, right? We're more lovable when we act in accordance to what makes our parents feel comfortable, right?
right.
And it is the birthplace of self-abandonment, right? I
Yeah.
cannot be myself and be loved. I have to perform for my love. I have to act a certain way, right? And again, there's good and there's bad as far as how I behave and how I am and who I am, right? And that's where it all starts. And then we spend a lifetime trying to heal that wound by then putting it out there on other people, right? Whether it's our children, whether it's our interpersonal relationships, whether it's the people of the world, whether it's the earth, right? And this is, again, these are those dominator systems we keep talking about.
Yeah, and it makes me think too of like up to this point in time, as you and I are having this conversation, we are each inherently a living archive of all these beliefs, all these stories, all these
Mm-hmm.
systems that we've chosen to give our awareness to. So if that's true, then wouldn't it then be as simple, but not easy to say, shifting the paradigm of our thought, like one moment, one present moment at a time? Would you say that as someone in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the work that we have to do comes down to building a foundation of capacity for
Mhm.
discomfort, first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of self awareness, people will say, like, oh, somebody doesn't have self awareness. Yes, you can teach self awareness, but self awareness, in my opinion, comes hand in hand with capacity for discomfort, because a lot of us don't have self-awareness because we can't handle the discomfort that it brings us when we see those things in ourselves, or something comes up, right, that we need to work with, or we feel that relational rupture and we realize that, like, we had a part in that and we need to own it and apologize, whatever that thing is. And so I think it starts on the foundation of capacity building. So it's okay. I can feel discomfort in this moment without having to fix it or turn it off or make it better, because what a lot of us do is we go to fix outward,
Yeah.
right? Like, you need to act differently to make me feel loved. You need to act differently to make me feel less anxious. The world needs to look different so that I can be comfortable in my own skin. Right. And so, no, it actually does not. I mean, even meditation, the practice of meditation is not about you tuning everything out. The practice of meditation is getting
Yeah.
more in right relationship with those parts of yourself, because the world's not changing for you.
Yeah.
And people should not have to change for you, right? Can we find our equanimity, our kind of level ground amidst people being people?
Yeah. That's so true. And everything you said just made me think of like, you would never expect to renovate and demolish your home by your neighbor doing it and something happening within your own home. You would actually have to invest in the time and the people, well, within your home and make that decision to remodel it so that it creates a foundation through which you can support the vision
Mm.
of home that you have for yourself. And people will invest in that all day long. But when it comes to their own relationship with their inner home, and something I've noticed you saying throughout the thread of this conversation is coming home to yourself, we often override this, which is why I love somatics, because it's really taught me to come back to my body and learn to love on this body that we have. I just appreciate that sentence so much. It is so big, coming home to yourself, and yet so simple at the same time.
And so hard at the same time.
So hard at the same time. Yeah. So something that I wanted to go to explore with you is something you said. Our children are not meant to be the balm for our unhealed wounds or the fulfillment of our unlived life. We're not meant to be the balm for our mother's unhealed wounds or the fulfillment of her unlived life. Can we unpack this a little bit? Because we do this. We all do
Mm-hmm.
this to some
We all do this.
degree. I also hear the language of like, oh my God, I'm becoming my mother, which is like a different side of the spectrum. But why does this happen? And how do we navigate this as mothers that like truly have the best intentions for our children, but also noticing to discern that line where it's like, I don't need them to live a certain way in order for me to feel a certain thing.
Well, I think it honestly, I think in a way, we can bring it all home here and say that we've touched on this, right? Which is
Yeah.
really this understanding of these dominator systems that we live in, how they have impacted us, whether we like it or not. We are just part of these systems, right? So the waking up that is required, the codependent way in which we relate to other people, which includes our children, right? Which is that other people are responsible for how we feel internally, right? And so there's this level of like coercion and manipulation and control that goes into the way that we show up in our relationships when we believe that other people need to be a certain way for us to be okay.
Right.
So this concept of, and when I wrote this post, so often it's this belief that we have, and I said this a second ago, that we somehow own our children.
Yeah.
Right. Our children do not belong to us. They come through us. We are the vessel through which their soul comes to be, but they are not ours. We do not own them. Right. I don't know what's happening in my daughter's brain or in her body or in her soul. I don't know what her soul's life, like the trajectory of her soul is meant to be. Right. No more than my partner, no more than my mother should really have known about me. Right. We are all so individual in that way. And there's beauty in that, but there's also fear in that, because what it does is it confronts us with the very, very harsh reality that we have zero control. Right? We have zero control over another person, over the world, over our realities. Like, yeah, sure, we can work on our mindsets and we can do this inner journey and these inner work that we're talking about. But at the end of the day, as humans, we have no control.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really difficult for most of us to sit with. This kind of goes back to that death and birth conversation we were having, right? Our inability to sit with death is directly related to our inability to sit with the idea that we have no control. And so, my child's job, her role in this go around is not to make me feel fulfilled. It's not to make me feel like a good mother. It's not to make me feel like I've done something right in my life. It's not her job. She doesn't owe me anything, actually, right? But that is a radical shift in the way that we look at our children, because for generations, and that's why I said the mother part of this, for generations, we have been taught that to be a good parent is to have obedient children. To be a good parent means your kids grow up to be a doctor, a lawyer, successful, right? Like whatever checklist item you want to put in there. We have made our children some kind of weird trophy, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's doing their souls a big disservice.
Which then lends to being rooted in fear and scarcity, which then lends to a conditional world that I need to be a certain way to belong. And if I don't belong, then it's social suicide or social death, which also oppresses our intuition. So how do we then begin as mothers? You speak to this in the book, but following that inner voice, how do we begin to orient to that when so much of our conditioning comes from that outside world?
Yeah. I mean, that term I keep saying, coming back to yourself, I think for a lot of us, it's not as simple as, and I know this from years of being a therapist now, it's not just as simple as like, oh, well, what are your needs? What are your desires? Like, what do you want? Right? Because most people are like, I don't know what the hell my needs are. I don't know what the hell my desires are, right? Especially when you're a newer mother. It becomes so not about you for so long.
Oh my
when
God.
Suddenly you have a breath, you're like, who the hell am I? What does bring me joy? Right?
Saying that.
Yes. And look, it's a season. It's a season. It's a part of early motherhood. Do I believe it should be like that? No, we are not meant to parent isolated like we do. But here we are. This is for whatever reason, our soul decided to plop itself down during this period, right? On our planet. And so this is the kind of card we've been dealt.
Yeah.
But it is the reality of early motherhood, right? So often we don't have the space or the time or the capacity to say, who am I? What do I want? Well, what I find to be really useful for those of us who that resonates with is to then back my way into who am I? What do I want? What do I not want? What do I like? Right? All of these bigger questions. And what do I mean by that? A lot of us know when we don't like something, when something makes us feel, let's say, undervalued, overlooked, makes us feel uncomfortable, makes us feel angry, makes us feel resentful, right? A lot of us actually do know what that is, but we've gotten so good at being like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Brush it under the rug. It's not worth it, right? That what I would say to people is start paying attention to that first, because I think that information is just as valuable as saying, oh my God, this is my desire. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to do, right?
So true.
that feels really intangible for a lot of people. And so I think we need to start smaller and start by saying, like, for example, with me, I've had a long journey with understanding that I have a very sensitive nervous system. And, look, I've gone down a lot of paths. Do I believe that in some essence I am 100% ADHD? Yes. What does that mean? I don't know. Depth psychology background leads me to kind of not want to label myself, right? So I'm experimenting there. But that long way of saying it is to say, I know I have a very sensitive nervous system. I know that I get flooded very quickly, very easily. I've done years of capacity building, years. I'm so much better than I was. And where am I going with this? I don't like to be pulled on. I don't like to be climbed on. My body does not like that. It sends me into immediate overwhelm and anxiety. I think for a lot of the beginning part of my daughter's life, I would push that down because it didn't make me a good mom. I should want my child to be climbing all over me and squishing my face and pulling on my arms and wanting to be held 24/7. What kind of mom am I if I don't want that? Well, I'm a human being first, who happens to be a mother, right? And here's what, when I say to my daughter, hey, baby, I love you and I want to be able to hold your hand, but I don't want to be pulled on. So if you're going to pull on my arm, I'm going to have to let go of your hand and have dad hold your hand. What I'm showing her is that I'm allowed to honor myself. I'm allowed to speak up and ask for what I want. I'm allowed to say, I don't like that. It doesn't feel good in my body. And what I'm teaching her is she's allowed to do the same thing.
Which is so big. Yeah. And that one sentence you just said is so powerful that we so often do not use at all, which is, I'm a human first, being a mother. And so I'm curious for you, as we get to the last 10 minutes of this conversation, what about, I have two questions. Partnership, where they feel like they are passing ships. And we can mistake this because it's so beautiful to have the knowledge around our nervous system, which I also just learned, like postpartum, our gray matter reduces severely. So we're not hardwired for connection. And then what does the woman do? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be intimate when our bodies are just like, ick, like I just need space. So for anyone listening to this, that's in a relationship, navigating maybe early parenthood or even later in parenthood, and they're in that season of passing ships, how can we pause and just make it not about the other? And maybe it's just that our chemical, like the hardwiring in our body is in a way as such where it's like sort of protecting us from something we might not feel safe to fully lean into.
I mean, I think this is kind of a big question because what it brings up for me first and foremost is how much in our society our worthiness has been wrapped up in being in relationship. So partnered is looked at as baseline. Anything else that's not partnered is looked at as different, right? I take issue with that as just a social model. Again, especially knowing how we are as creatures and the way that we've evolved, right? Like our species wasn't actually intended to be living in the ways that we're living right now, whether we're talking about partnership, family structures, like all the ways, right? We're very much going against how we are inherently built to survive and to thrive, actually. So I think there actually has to be a lot of unpacking that has to go into first. I do not need to be in a partnership to be more valuable as a human being, to be more worthy as a human being. We have an issue in this society, I think, with looking at longevity as some measure of success in a relationship. And I vehemently argue with that point. I am much more likely to celebrate my friends who, after 8 to 10 years of marriage and children, have decided to amicably change form of that relationship and are lovely friends and co-parents now, but are no longer in that same relational dynamic than somebody who says, oh, we're going to celebrate my grandparents' 50th anniversary. And I know those grandparents hate each other's guts and have barely spoken in 20 years. I don't want to celebrate that. That to me does not feel celebratory, right? But that again is a shift in the way that we have been taught to live in this world. So this is kind of a long-winded way of saying recently I had a pretty big blow up with my partner. And there was a conversation that was had between me and my best friend, where my best friend actually said to him, I think one of the biggest shifts that are happening right now in our society is this reckoning with, and she was saying us as in women to him as a man, like we don't need you to survive anymore. And what is that bringing up for everybody involved, right? Like women couldn't have a bank account in this country until what, 1978, right? So when we say we don't need you, what we mean is we don't need you to survive. So if she's here, it's because she wants to be, not because she has to be. And that knowing should, in essence, really shake up the way you show up in your relationship, right? Now, what it shouldn't do is make you self-abandon in order to keep somebody there or keep them happy.
Right.
But I think for all of us, once we start to suss out the difference between a need and a want, we stop putting so much pressure on our relationships to look and stay the same always.
Oh my
They
God.
won't.
So true. Yeah.
Right? We evolve, they evolve. We might be in a season. Like, that's okay. We're in the season that we're in. Will we find our way back to ourselves? Possibly. Will we not? Also possible. Can we do that consciously? Can we do that lovingly? Do we have to get to the place where we hate each other's guts before we can actually change the form of our relationship?
Yeah.
Right? We're in control of it. I think it's that too. It's like bringing agency back. Like, I'm not a victim to this. I have agency. I have control and power over what do I want this to look like? What feels good? What doesn't? And can I work to depersonalize it, I guess?
Yeah, and then noticing too, like what I hear you say, like within the context of my own experience with this is like how often we over-identify with roles. And, you know, like especially for males, it's like I'm the provider, and how
That's
often
right.
that can disrupt their ability to just listen instead of fix, hold space. But yeah, that's really very powerful. Thank you for naming all that and what your best friend said. I never even thought of it that way.
Yeah, I think it gives us an opportunity. I think somebody can hear that and get very like upset and activated by that. Or we can hear it and say, oh, there's a real opportunity here. Again, and this isn't just romantic. We could say this for any of our relationships. How would I show up in my relationship with a deep understanding that this person does not belong to me and they don't need me to survive, right? Like if they're here out of a desire, it will change the way that I show up.
And so my last question for you with regards to the book and just the thread of this whole conversation, coming home to yourself and everything we spoke to, what would the Vanessa, who you are today, if you could have a conversation with yourself before this all began and you embarked on this career that you are so beautifully in right now, what would she tell her to someone that may not have known that you were going to write books and be in this experience?
I guess, that's a big one. I think maybe the answer that's coming up for me is every single thing that's happening is going to inform the next step that you take. So to let go of some of the resistance, right? Like earlier, let go of some of the control, let go of some of the resistance. It's part of it. Right. It's all, and it's not to like do the spiritual platitude of like everything happens for a reason. It's more to just say you're so scared of the resistance. I spent so much of my life trying to avoid conflict, trying to avoid being looked at in a negative way, playing the good girl, doing the people pleasing, all the things. But if I could say to her then just like start to embrace and allow for the conflict and the discomfort, that's where all the juice is.
That's so profound. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then, I mean, this felt like 5 minutes, and I want to ask you so much more. I think I've hit 2 things on my list, but it was so organic and beautiful. But the last thing I wanted for everyone to hear is just how they can connect with you and find you. And your book is out now, which is amazing.
Yeah. So everything's at my website. It's all linked through there, vanessabennett.com. I'm mostly active on Instagram, although my real hope over this next year, excuse me, is to just like slowly back away from social media as much as I can and just kind of have it there as like a creative output. But I'm really feeling the call to like challenge the relationship that we all have with social media. But Instagram is
conversation.
That's right. Vanessa S. Bennett. But yeah, anything on my website, you can find all the things, all of my offerings, all the social medias, all that.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to sharing this with the world.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.